Serious women of Reddit who were proposed to by their so and said no. What's your story? Sold my great grandmom's wedding set to buy a gaudy diamond monstrosity of a ring. I had asked him to use the engagement ring to propose with, as I would have been the 4th generation to wear it. He said it was ugly and awful and wouldn't have his woman wearing second-hand garbage. I dumped his ass and got the set back from the pawn shop. Just realized this was the 2nd time I dumped a guy based on this kind of behavior. I sure can pick an ex. I told him things were going downhill and I wanted to end things, so he decided to propose to me, thank God, not in public, as an attempt to get me to stay. I said no. Isn't it weird? We had problems, and he was too lazy to work on them. It wasn't when I bought books. It wasn't when I wanted to talk. It wasn't when I suggested counseling. It wasn't when I gave him a deadline for leaving. It was when the deadline was reached and I was packing that he decided he wanted to save the relationship by asking me to marry him. Ducking lazy. I've heard loads of stories like this of people who can't be bothered to put in an ounce of effort because the current status quo suits them just fine. But when their partner reaches their breaking point, only then do they ask for a second chance, not realizing they already burned through multiple chances. My own father did this. My mom and him went to couples counseling, and after the first appointment his homework assignment given by the counselor was to schedule the second appointment. It didn't happen. When my mom served him with divorce papers a year later, he asked if she wanted him to book that appointment now. Shaking my head. He brought me up to his apartment, about a 2-hour drive from my college. I was basically trapped there. He asked me while he was feeling insecure about the relationship and figured a proposal would lock me in place. I dodged it for a few days, but I needed to get back to classes and he wouldn't take me back till I said yes. I figured he was a bright guy and would come to his senses eventually. He got me back to school. Eventually he realized that coercion is not a good proposal strategy. Dating a guy for a few years. Was 20 years old at the time. Very controlling. Wasn't going great. We were opening Christmas presents with his family when he asked. He proposed while saying he loved the woman I would become one day. I said yes in public, but no in private. If you don't even love me now, why propose now? Needless to say, it didn't last long. I had an ex-boyfriend that I hadn't even seen or spoken to in 3 months show up to my parents' house at 3 AM. My stepmom would stay up to all hours of the night watching TV, so she saw his car lights when he pulled into the side driveway. She came and got me furious he was there and asked why I lied about breaking up with him. I had to explain we were broken up and I had no idea why he was there. When I went outside, he was leaning on his car looking love-struck and crazy. He told me that the universe wanted us together and it was cosmic fate. He then pulled out a frat boy bottle opener ring with a cat toy tied to it and told me he had an important question to ask me. I told him no flat out before he even asked. I pointed at his car and told him to go home. When he asked why, I listed all the things that led me to break up with him, including him dropping out of school multiple times and not having a job once during our 2-year relationship. He told me he did have a job now. When I asked where he worked, because I knew he was lying, he looked me in the eyes and said if he told me that he'd have to kill me. I had enough and told him to get the heck off my family's property, and he left reluctantly, telling me he'd be back. I never saw him again, but I heard through the grapevine that he told others that he had shown up in a tux with a huge diamond ring that I threw on the ground. I used to wonder what would have happened if my stepmom didn't see his car pull up. Sorry for typos. I'm on mobile. A girl I was casually dating, not even in a relationship with, proposed in front of her toddler niece and nephews and a large crowd of people at the aquarium. Even asked her nephew, "Do you want OP to be on DOP?" with the ring in hand. I said yes in public and then no privately. Never saw her again after that one. This is one for me. I have done this twice. One, we were dating for about 4 years and we're in our early 20s. I felt unsure about our rest of life compatibility and suggested we needed to have some serious conversations to work out our plans moving forward after uni. All of these conversations made me increasingly sure we were incompatible. Surprise, surprise. They made him increasingly sure about the future, and he wanted to get married. We were literally doing the deed under a lit Christmas tree at 3 AM and he asked me to marry him. I said we weren't ready. Bad plan. He still didn't have any idea what that would look like, or how we would work out some fairly serious things around our location, jobs, etc. Eventually I got tired of saying no to a marriage I didn't think would work, and felt pushed and trapped. So I broke up with him. We remain friends. I was a bridesmaid in his wedding a couple years ago. It was the right choice. To only dating very briefly. He proposed in a restaurant, with a terrifyingly large ring, and provided me a PDF copy of his tax return, so I could see he would be a good provider. Everything he did told me he hadn't really ever listened to me, or got to know me properly. I said yes in the restaurant, to avoid causing embarrassment, and called it all off afterwards. He turned into an obsessive stalker, and I had to get an avo in the end. A few years back, I was dating this guy. At first, he seemed very kind, sweet and happy, handsome too. I thought he was a great catch, especially as some toxic friends of mine were lowering my self-esteem. A few months after we started dating, he started changing. It was subtle at first. He would stop spending time with me and blaming me for it. Then came the gaslighting and manipulation. He started isolating me from my family and hurting me when I refused to do things for him. Eventually, I got the strength to deal with the situation and tell him that we were over. To get me to stay, he hosted a large party with lots of friends and publicly asked me to marry him. I said no. X asked me over lunch to marry him. He'd broken up with me about once a week for the last few months over nothing. He had serious emotional mood issues that have now been diagnosed, but he was just a really difficult person to be around in general. I started laughing because it was just absolutely ridiculous. He asked why I was laughing, and I brought up how he broke up with me every single week. He flat out said he wanted to get married because then he knew he wouldn't be able to leave, as if that stopped people from just getting a divorce. We broke up for good not long after this, but the whole thing was bananas. Did he break up with you at the end of that conversation? Seems like a pretty good time for it, given his track record. Nope. Sadly, things went on for a few more weeks and the story in fact gets crazier, including taking another girl with him cross country to a friend's wedding. Told me about it when he came home, at which point I asked him to leave my house. He begged and pleaded for another few weeks and then told me, and I quote, he had planned to propose to me at friend's wedding, and when I decided not to go with him he lost control and asked this other girl to go with him. Final nail in the already beaten down coffin for me, lol. My then boyfriend wanted to marry me because of how much money I would eventually make upon getting into my field. He then wanted to share a cell phone bill, rent an apartment, and be a stay-at-home dad, while trying to convince me to have sex with him without a condom, all while having anger issues and almost hitting me twice. This isn't even half of what went on. We dated for 3 months. I left that relationship fast. Thought he was a good person initially before we dated, which is why I went out with him. Edit 1, I forgot to add this because I'm on mobile. He wanted all the birthday gift he gave me back. Said he never had money for anything, but would smoke almost 3 packs of cigarettes a day. He would also try to condition me into things by stating we will never go to zoos, or we will always be poor and never travel. To no offense babe, I will never buy you a diamond ring as I don't believe in it. Tried to teach him how to drive, get a better job because he asked me to helping his family out. He only wanted to continue wilting as a wallflower and complain about his circumstances rather than grow. Edit 2, he would even try to go out of his way for me to avoid my family or future get-togethers when my family tried to help him. We were 19, 21, and had been together for 2 years. He took me to Paris, pulled out all the stops, and proposed under the Eiffel Tower. I told him it wasn't a no, it was a not yet if he would wait. I wanted to travel and knew I was too young for marriage. We ended up traveling together, making amazing memories through the years. We got engaged when I was 24 and married when I was 27 in the most perfect service, and have been happily married 4 years next week. I said no when I wasn't quite proposed to. The first year I was with my ex, I went to Christmas at his family's place. We'd been together close to a year, and we'd had a lot of problems already. 3 months prior to this, I had nearly broken up with him, but we worked it out. Cue massive viral. His family had this weird tradition where they watched each person individually open each gift while the rest watched on. I thought I was done opening gifts and was chatting with his mom on my right when she motioned for me to look to my left. There was my boyfriend, down on one knee, holding a small jewelry box and smiling. I didn't wait for him to say anything. I just said, "No, please excuse me," and ran out of the house. His bill later told me all the color drained out of my face, and I looked at my ex with abject terror. Anyway, he followed me out of the house and explained that what he was holding wasn't an engagement ring, but a diamond necklace. He convinced me to come back inside, and his family was nice, but there was definitely tension for the rest of the night. We ended up staying together for 2 more years, and actually did get engaged later on, but it was an incredibly poor decision, and I'm very relieved that I did not actually marry him. My ex was an abusive narcissist. I was 21, very naive. First relationship, he was 54 and divorced. I had been gaslit and pushed into the relationship, but didn't realize that until later. He demanded keys to my apartment and passwords, but refused to give me his, and a whole list of crap like this. Now I wouldn't put up with it, but at the time I did. He proposed at 11 months, but by then he was verbally and emotionally abusive and had come close to hitting me. My sperm donor father was a very abusive alcoholic, so I only have memories of his BS, and I knew I didn't want to repeat the abuse cycle. My mom, grandma, and aunt have all had abusive husbands, and I didn't want it to continue with me. Once ex-BF became abusive, I warned him to knock that shit off, or I'd leave. He proposed after calling me a stupid bitch. I followed through. I changed the locks in my apartment and my passwords. He actually called me after I changed my password, screaming about it. I broke up with him. Why the heck is he trying to get into my stuff? After a few weeks of me refusing to go back to him, he contacted my boss and accused me of stealing, and contacted the fire department I volunteered with and accused me of endangering my team to showboat and get attention. Thankfully both believed me over him, and he was blacklisted. He tried to show up several more times at FD events, and he was always immediately escorted off property. I'm still glad I got rid of that asshole. A friend from high school whom I had known for about a year proposed to me while I was in my first semester of college. The proposal was made over the phone. Long distance. This was in the late 1960s. I never saw him as more than a great friend. My mom thought he was really great, which was nice, but no reason to base his marriage. He really was a nice guy, and we had fun together, but I was not in love with him. A few years ago I found out that he died of cancer in the mid 1980s, and I was sorry to learn of his death. We did not keep in touch, and I only saw him once after the proposal, and he had married a lovely woman who I thought suited him. Seems I was wrong, as she divorced him at some point. I had a boyfriend cheat on me so many times. The breakup was hard, but then he got activated from the military reserves. I didn't meet anyone till 2 months before he came back. The whole time I wanted him back, but he and I weren't really officially together, and I knew he was talking to another girl the whole time he was gone. He came back and saw the other girl first. He says to break up with her. Yeah, right, and I realized I didn't like him. Thank God. He showed up at my apartment, saw me with my new boyfriend, and proposed in a crying fit. It was horrid. 3 months earlier, and I'd have done it, but thank God for the timing of things. We'd been together about a year at this point, and I'd made it clear to him that marriage was a big scary thing I wasn't ready for yet. About a month later, we went away for a weekend to one of our usual haunts. I was looking out the hotel window at something when he suddenly said my name. I turned around, and he was stood there with a ring, and then asked me to marry him. I was so shocked and upset that he clearly didn't listen that I ran out into the street crying. I called my parents and one of my friends, all of whom were incredibly pissed off that he didn't respect my wishes and wondered what the heck I was supposed to do. I eventually composed myself and went back into the hotel. But obviously we were both very upset. He said we could just break it off if it's too much, or we could stay together, and he'd promised not to mention marriage again. We took the second option. We did get married a couple of years later, but this was mainly because he was the least shitty partner I'd had at that point. And I did that dangerous thing of, well, he does A, but at least he doesn't do B and C. B, I was content and thought happy was a daft Hollywood thing. And C, I thought I was being mature and grown up and wanted to reward him for sort of looking after me when I'd been ill a few months prior. We got divorced about 5 years ago, and I realize now that not only were we very incompatible, but he was incredibly pushy and always found a way to get what he wanted. He told me later he had planned to propose in the restaurant, so thank Christ he didn't do that. I said no the first time my ex-husband asked me to marry him because my mom legitimately cried when I said I thought he was going to propose. Like, your soul is breaking crying. She said he would make my life miserable and she didn't want me to experience that kind of heartbreak. I got married to him a few months later because I found out I was pregnant. Honestly, mom was not wrong. Everything about our relationship said some red flags. I was 21 and he was 27. We started dating when I was 16. He didn't like any of my friends' high school or college. He checked my text messages all the time. He had me move in with him so he could take care of me during my final stressful year of college, but I ended up doing all the housework, cooking, and cleaning. He made decent enough money but spent it all on luxuries for him to the point where we were constantly broke. After we had my daughter, he insisted on moving away from my family to live in another city. I had no support and he was absolutely useless at helping with anything baby related. And then my dumbass stuck around for another 8 years. Honestly, should have bounced on the second proposal too. Raya ducking grets. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.